Hey guys, it's Jordan here from Switchwatch. How are you all doing today? Today I've got a review of The Adventures of Elena Temple on the Nintendo Switch. Now this is a very retro inspired platformer, which I've done very recently. But anyways, this one seems to be a little more interesting, but let's find out if it's good or not. Let's get on with it. There's retro inspired games, and then there's retro inspired games. The Adventures of Elena Temple is firmly in that overemphasized one. You know, when the word gets italicized just to tell you how truly retro inspired the game is. The Adventures of Elena Temple is both so unique yet so familiar that it's definitely of interest to me. But is it any good? There isn't a story in The Adventures of Elena Temple. Sadly, it's so simple and retro that any semblance of story is deemed superfluous. A pity considering the theme of a female Indiana Jones type character always has room for something interesting, even if we've seen that before with Tomb Raider. The audio is pretty decent and suitably retro. The chip tunes have been selected rather well, and thankfully it's not just one tune looping over and over again, which is always a danger. There are a few different tunes that you'll be hearing blooping and bleeping from the game, all of which are nicely enjoyable, if not anything spectacular or memorable. The visuals are where things get really interesting. Indeed, it's this area that presents Elena Temple's biggest gimmick and arguably its biggest selling point. You can play the game with 7 different virtual classic machines, right from a Commodore 64 ripoff to a Game Boy knockoff. This changes nothing about the gameplay except for the look of the game, and of course it is completely cosmetic. It's a full-on superficial selling point, which is often one of the worst offenders when it comes to games, but there is something wholly charming about this one. If this was released on the Game Boy, I'm sure I would have thought it was pretty decent looking for the time. For what The Adventures of Elena Temple sets out to achieve visually, the developer has done a grand job. Performance wise, as you'd expect, it's perfect. This is not the kind of game to trouble the Nintendo Switch. The gameplay is as simple as the game looks. Elena Temple could very well have been released on retro consoles of the time, and it reminds me of a long lost Game Boy game so much that it almost gives me nostalgia. It plays so simply like one too, since there are only 2 buttons that you can use, jump and shoot. Elena is plonked right into the middle of a huge maze-like temple, and you are free to walk around as you please, exploring in any direction that looks best. Filled with around 50 rooms, this beast of a temple does bring out that little bit of explorative excitement. It's like a playground of potential, and due to the lack of additional abilities and such, you're just about free to go anywhere right from the beginning. Each room in this temple is like a mini test of its own. There's always some sort of trial to do, whether it be avoiding spikes, jumping on disappearing platforms, or taking down the handful of baddies that prowl around. Sometimes they can be really simple and have nothing more than what has been mentioned, but there are some slightly more complicated ones involving pressing switches and finding secret exits. The controls are purposely stiff. Jumping is very rigid, which I'm confident plenty of you will not like. It's archaic, which is both a blessing and a curse. A curse in the fact that it's just not what we're used to these days, but it does feel very authentic, which is what it's going for. You have a weapon too, a measly 2-shot pistol. This can be used to shoot pots open, kill enemies, or even press far away switches. It's incredibly useful and pleasingly limited. There is plenty of ammo hanging around, but it can still be quite tricky doing what you need to do before you manage to pick up more. I actually like the restrictions and balance placed on it. The goal of the game is to find the dozen or so diamonds laying around, which will grant you access to the final room and big treasure. You'll also want to collect as many coins as you can, as finding these will grant you access to a certain room to get at least 1 diamond that's important in your quest. This is not an easy task for sure, and you will die plenty of times thanks to the hazards around. Coming back again is pretty instantaneous, and you'll be plonked right where you last picked up an item. It can be pretty tricky at times, although perfectly acceptable. All in all, it will take you about an hour or 2 hours to make your way through the maze and collect enough coins and diamonds to satisfy the goal. It's not long. It's a very modest game with little ambition aside from replicating a retro experience. Playing through a game may not be to everyone's liking, but I can see some people wanting to make a second playthrough to make it more smooth than the potentially meandering first time through. As stated, the console visual filters don't change anything and certainly not worth playing through all 7 times, so there is a limited mileage with this one. I think many people will make comparisons with my recent review of the ZX Spectrum inspired Deep Ones, an equally retro inspired game with probably more ambition than this one. Adventures of Elena Temple is much better though, it's far more sculpted and purposeful than Deep Ones ever was. In this game, everything has a reason for being where it is. It may not look like much, but the Adventures of Elena Temple is well planned and designed, as simple as it may be. For value, this game is selling for as cheap as chips, $4.99 or £4.49. It's a price that reflects the small breadth of gameplay it has to offer. It's modestly priced and I think that's a very respectable choice from the developer. I'm not sure how long you will want to play it after just one time though, maybe with a different overlay and filters a few times, that's probably enough though. The price is well to reflect that and you can't really go wrong with a purchase. Overall, like I've said a few times, The Adventures of Elena Temple is a modest game with limited ambition. It's not groundbreaking or engrossing or deep, but it's a very quaint experience, probably one of the most legit retro experiences that I've had. If Adventures of Elena Temple was released on the Game Boy back in the day, I would not have batted an eyelid. It's short, simple, but oddly enjoyable, especially as you get deeper into the adventure. Not everyone is going to like it, that is for certain, and if you don't have any nostalgia for games like these, I would avoid it like the plague. Those who do long for a simpler time are in for a mini little treat, I'm sure. I would award it a 6.5 out of 10. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching this review of The Adventures of Elena Temple. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then we would love it if you gave us a thumbs up and leave a comment below. What do you think of this game? If you're new here, then click that subscribe button, and also at the end card, click on that playlist to check out more recent Switch reviews from us. I've been Jordan from Switch Watch, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.